Excellent. There we go. Hey, just like live TV. So, hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Track 5 panel, Building a Strategy to Leverage GSIs. I am going to be your moderator, Larry Walsh. I'm the Chief Analyst and CEO of Channelnomics. And it is my pleasure to be a part of I'm going to say a small part of this discussion, because I got three very large personalities that are full of experience and knowledge on this topic. And I'm not even going to do any type of cold opener. I'm just going to dive right into it because we have short time and a lot to say. So look, let's start with introductions. So I'm going to start with the nicest looking person on the panel, Balaji. So Balaji Subramanian. But I'm trying not to be sexist here. Balaji Subramanian, he is most recently at Zuora, but I've known Balaji for a long time. He is an industry veteran, steep in knowledge on ecosystems and building productive partnerships. Balaji, it's great to have you here with us.
Nice to be here.
And then, of course, truly the best looking person on the panel, Jules Johnston. She is the Senior Vice President of Global Channel Sales at Equinix. And coming to us, I believe you're coming to us from Rhode Island, are you not, Jules?
That's right. That's right.
Excellent. And last but not least, man who needs no introductions, Ross Brown, an investor, an advisor, an entrepreneur, and serial channel chief. So with that, welcome everybody.
Hello.
All right. So look, we're here to talk about leveraging GSIs. I got to tell you, first of all, everybody just relax. I'm okay. I did spend a full week in Vegas. The judge let me off on good behavior, so I was able to come home. But all I was is this inundated, swimming among GSIs from around the world, talking about, I don't know, they were talking about this silly thing called AI. But it is clear that GSIs are performing a significant function in the ecosystem, in the go-to-market motions, and they are, at least from my perspective, they are becoming a significant linchpin for the more complex deployments, whether they're on-prem, hybrid, or in cloud. But I want to start with this because I do find myself in conversations frequently where we're talking about GSIs and we don't really have a clear definition. I'd like to hear from all of you. And Ross, I'm going to start this with you because I know you have some clarity on it. You know, what distinguishes a global systems integrator from a rank and file partner, and what are the different flavors of GSIs that are out there? Because I think it's pretty significant.
Yeah, I think there's a taxonomy here, but it's getting blurry and merging around. So I think it's kind of changing a little bit. So there's a vector here that's important to pull out. So first, let's distinguish between people that build stuff as a business versus people that manage or migrate stuff as a business. Because your MSPs and a lot of your managed environments or your cloud migrations and things like that are really very small amounts of people doing very high amounts of consumption of IT services. So there's a little bit of an over focus on the move to consume as opposed to build, but build is where real platforms are built and real growth with GSIs happen. So this is where it gets really interesting, is to think about what's the orientation the GSI has with their customer. And then you can see some patterns. One is the advisory ones that come out of really the audit background, like PwC and EY and KPMG, who are rapidly trying to either shed their audit business into a separate business the way Accenture and Deloitte did, or to separate in firewalls in some way, or to really divest from a lot of that so they can be more free, because they have woken up to, it's not really about just consuming the cloud. Now it's really about this massive opportunity on the AI and building these new innovations that require you to be in that business. So they're coming late to it, but they're rapidly moving fast. That's why I say Vector is important there. Then you have your full service firms like Deloitte and IBM Consulting and Accenture and a couple others that you could put in that category to a lesser extent, like Cognizant and folks like that, where they really are, we operate on platforms to build innovation. And that's just a very, very different orientation. Just put a pin in those for a second, because there's something unique about them I want to share in a second. Then you have your Indian SIs, which I largely say the Indian guys, but there's some, corner cases like Siemens and folks like that in Europe, where they own applications. They are not a pure bodies times hours. They own Trizetto for payments if you're Cognizant, or they own TOPS or Proamis in the case of WePro for aircraft maintenance and cargo management stuff. So they often look at platforms of applications, which is big ERP plays, big HCM plays, human capital management, or like medical records and platforms like Cerner and McKesson as full employment acts. It's like once we attach ourselves to one of those application platforms, we just are the in-house agency who does all the innovation around it. So that's kind of unique around the Indian guys, is they have a tendency to be a mix of product, but it's really product to drive institutionalization of their service. So that middle one, talking about the Accentures of the world for a second, what I think is really unique there is to process how they pitch to customers as a technology company. And this took me forever to understand. I've been doing this for 35 years, and I'm going to confess that this only really hit me in the past 7 years. That, like, you take a major application like ERP, the customer wants to move it to the cloud and take it off-prem, or whether it's Cerner, like an EMR system, or human capital management, or whatever complex run your business app. The way the customer looks at this is like, okay, what are the odds that Google is going to fail at this? What are the odds that Oracle is going to fail? Like a compute service is going to die, or an Equinix data center is going to lose power. Sorry, Jules. Or something like that. It's pretty low. Like it's in the 5 nines. What are the odds that the 2,000 decisions Accenture has to make on my behalf, one of those is going to be wrong and cause something to go wrong? Fairly high. All right, now how much money am I spending? Well, it's $1 million in the cloud platform service. It's $10 million in Accenture services to move it. What am I really buying? I'm not really buying a cloud service. I'm buying a project from Accenture. They're using a cloud service. Like, so one of the big realizations with the Deloitte and Accentures is your product doesn't matter. They're pitching a major transformational, like, higher class of Cecil, the entire Cecil to be to Millcast will show up and be there for the next 2 years to transform this business process. And you're just trying to win that part of it. So I jokingly, as I'll finish on this, I jokingly tell people, even if you're a platform, you're largely like going up to an architect as a toilet vendor and saying, I've got the best toilet in the world. Nobody cares unless it gets time to pick the toilet. The rest of the time, they're really like, is this house going to have enough bedrooms, and isn't the neighborhood I want it to be? It's going to have all the features. So the decisions around what they're building and how they're going to create an outcome for the customer is so much more primary than what platform or what tool they're using. So that's the hard thing for people to understand, is how do I go drive product sales with an Accenture? You don't. You go create projects that drive Accenture services that consume your platform.
Russ, jumping off on that point, you just, first of all, I agree with you about what they're trying to do and how you have to hook into a project for GSI, unlock a project, not sell them your product, but unlock services revenue for that GSI. That's sort of the path that I would recommend people listening who are thinking about how to make them GSIs more effective channel partners for you. The other thing I would say is that if you zoom out and you think about what are these integrators doing, right? Fundamentally, they are performing, whether it's legacy systems integration, or it's enterprise application integration, or it's third-party integration, or it's business-to-business integration. And where do your products and services fit in those projects? So if you think about it, sort of working backwards from what they're doing for the customer, the outcomes that Ross was describing, that the GSI is on the hook to deliver, and will be on the hook to deliver in some cases over a many-year outsource agreement, or advisory. In either case, they're trying to drive an outcome they're trying to accomplish these things for their enterprise customer. That's your enterprise customer. And where do your products and services hook into those? And I think that's how I would encourage you to think through walk backwards from what the customer's trying to accomplish and figure out where you can nest into those as a subordinate part of a larger outcome.
Yeah.
Does that, like, and I appreciate what you're saying is like focusing on the outcome. And Ross and I have talked about this many times about, it's more about facilitating what they're doing rather than them trying to facilitate what you do. Balaji, please jump in on this. So does this then mean that you have to continuously communicate and message into them about your capabilities or about how you can unstuck something that they're working on? Or is this something about building a reference architecture that they are or helping them build a reference architecture around you or building a practice around you?
Yeah, those are all astute points. And going back to what Ross said for a second, where, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, is that your product, right, doesn't really matter too much to them. When they're working with customers, they're really working with them on these large transformational type of projects. And yes, they were going to recommend solutions to that, and hopefully you can do it. So to Larry, to your point, you used the word reference architecture, right? That's one of the biggest successes that I've had, at least working with GSIs, is when, from an enablement standpoint, you enable them on two things, right, which really resonate with them. One is industry. You got to remember, all of these GSIs, they are, they have a heavily matrix type of organization, but one key organizational piece is industry. And the P&L is owned many times by those industry leaders. So enabling them on use cases, reference architectures by industry is where I've learned this the hard way. That's really led to bigger successes with them and them leaning in more to, because I've worked in very small companies that, are small compared to an Accenture or Deloitte. So just getting their mind share is very difficult. And the way to do that, I found out, is industry, reference architecture, use cases that resonate with those P&L managers. That's when they will lean in more and say, oh, I love it. And then the last piece I'll add to it, you mentioned also, is, again, I learned this the hard way, is that how much services dollar do they get for every software dollar that they sell, right? So I've made it a point now to become friends with my, Accentures, Deloitte's, PwC's, the world, et cetera, and ask them, right? And they've given me good numbers. And so now I can truthfully say, you can earn, $4, 4x, $4 for every dollar of software, or $8 for every, thing. And that really also is part of the enablement that I give to those partner managers as well on their side.
I think that's also your last point is so important around how you might get sort of out of a procurement only battle with a global systems integrator you want to partner with. And so that price debate and that price pressure that you might get from a pure procurement exercise versus an exercise in which you've done what you just suggested, which is provide some evidence of the pull through and the adjacent services and the projects that you unlock. And that sort of that ability to articulate that reference architecture, that use case, and the pull through dollars is really important for manufacturers and vendors to protect the prices and the margins that you need in order to deliver the quality of services and products that you want to deliver through these GSIs. You got to make that case that there's pull through for them, and there's a reason the use case and the reference architecture will help you tell the story.
Yeah.
I do want to add.
Go ahead, Ross.
Which is, I feel like we're talking a lot about industry solutions, and I think that's absolutely right for platforms and for complex solution stuff, right? There's times, though, where your product's a tool. It's a thing to solve a problem. Right. And so I go back to like early days of my career when I was at Citrix, and I kept looking through like all the point of sale reports and looking at who was buying and which partners were active with us. And I discovered we had 17 different partner entries for Accenture teams, where they had just come in and joined the silver tier of my program to get access to a Metaframe product to be able to deliver an ERP environment, because they needed to put all the ERP into a single VDI solution to prevent all this network chatter. Well, okay, did they ever tell the customer that they were on VDI? No, this is just how we're going to deploy SAP to your 10,000 users. They looked at me, and I didn't figure this out until we saw this data, that I was a tool for them to succeed at delivering a much, much bigger project. I thought I was delivering $1 million deals, and the reality is these were $20 million, $50 million IT projects for Dell and Cisco and all these other guys, and I was a rounding error utility that was needed. Now, it was huge for me, but figuring out how to turn that into, all right, I need to sell to the GSI, and that's the critical point of my comment is, sometimes they're your customer.
Sometimes they are, absolutely, you're so right. And especially in if they're in an outsourced capacity where they're often making the decisions on behalf of the enterprise customer, because what they're on the hook for is not your product, it's the outcome.
Yeah. So, all right, that's a good point, but they can also be your competitor. So we got a question. We have a question in the chat from Zertra. I hope I pronounced it right. I'm terrible with names, John, so I apologize. And this is a good question because it comes up. You look at a company like NTT and Atos. I mean, particularly Atos, and let's set aside the difficulties that they're having right now. But they have product. They're selling. Ross, you mentioned this as well. But a lot of these GSIs are also developing their own managed services. And so they are. You could be selling technology into them that they use to deliver a service. They could be selling their own services that are competing with you. They could be selling their own products that compete with you. How do you balance that out?
Very clear clarity up front about whether they're going to pitch theirs or yours. Is when we don't have that, we have struggled and had to repair. So I would encourage you to think through your rules of engagement and sort of arrange with those primary partners up front whether they're going to lead with their services. You know, in my experience, Equinix has managed services. Our GSIs don't use ours; they use their own, and we understand going in as a subordinate part of the larger solution. Our managed services are not going to be part of that solution. They're going to use theirs, but we want to partner, and so that it'll be the other breadth of Equinix's portfolio, like it could be the breadth of other pieces of your product portfolio. So I would encourage you to think through your partners and the overlap, have good discussions with them up front about which ones they're going to use and not use, so you don't get relationship damage.
Yeah.
Ross, you're going to say something.
Oh, it just was, John had a question there about Atos and NTT that I just wanted, because there are regional partners that I would point to, and some of them are been around for a while, like Atos, and other ones are relatively new, like EPAM, and Slalom is certainly growing pretty fast to 30-something thousand people. They're in this interesting space where I think, and I'm just talking about NTT is a little different. We'll talk about them in a second, but in that class of regional SIs, there is a really good use case for them as being the disruptors to go disrupt the Accentures and Deloittes of the world. So they rely on account incumbency like any other large institution. And so if a disruptive product comes in from a fast-moving regional GSI that's got an exec sponsor that's saying, hey, I think these guys can really help us here, it really can move the GSIs and compel them to engage in a much faster way. Now, it also depends on who they are, right? Like, I'm just going to pick on Fujitsu as an example here, where Fujitsu is not scaring Accenture in any account. Now, there's an AI partner we use called Quantify that's absolutely massively tearing up accounts. And Accenture immediately went into hug mode of, oh my God, if they're in our accounts, we want to figure out how to subcontract them and pull them into our projects and sort of almost white blood cell them so they're not going to be disruptive to us. But that drove a massive change in adoption of OCI AI services. Was we kept taking this disruptive, fast-moving, rapidly growing from 0 to 6,000 employee regional SI and all these things where they were so specialized, they scared the GSI into aligning. So that, I really think there's a play for those regional guys, which isn't just we're cheaper, smaller. They're also more nimble and they're more willing to disrupt.
So Ross, you use the word regional, which I think is interesting. I'm not sure if Atos would actually consider themselves to be regional, but there are regional SIs. So, and you do see, there's increasing friction between, relatively smaller companies like WWT or Presidio that are pushing up. You do have sales that do get under, the GSIs do talk about sales being undercut by the large account guys like CDW. So when does a company morph from that distinction from being something smaller or something regional? I mean, not to call WWT a $20 billion company small, but relative to Accenture, they are. What's the graduation point, and what makes the difference?
So this is a great question, which I ask people all the time, and this is if there's a simple question, this is it. What percentage of your business is derived from product sales, right? If you ask, guys at like Joe Kavanaugh and the guys at WWT that answer, they can tell you it's 86% is product sales and 14% is services or whatever. If you ask Julie Sweet or Samia Tara, for any of these guys at Accenture what percentage of their business is product sales, they look at you and go, I don't know. Why is that even relevant, right? So that's your big distinction. Like if they can answer that question, they're not a GSI because they're in the reseller business. That's still a part of their thing. And this is part of the problem, not to pick on NTT, but the Dimension Data part of their business, not the data center side, not the Docomo, not the carrier side, but the Dimension Data side is largely captive by Cisco and Microsoft as a licensing engine and a reselling engine. Yeah. They have yet to transition truly into we own IT outcomes for given industries, as opposed to we own IT layers for the IT team. And that's a very big distinction between a regional guy and a GSI is, do they own industry outcomes?
Right. I was just going to say you mentioned regional, and there's a nuance here that, especially if people who are just starting to work with GSIs need to understand is that these GSIs that we've mentioned, Accenture or Deloitte or PwC or whoever, something like that, they're very franchised. And so, Deloitte in US doesn't talk to anyone in Deloitte Europe or Deloitte Japan or Deloitte Asia, right? And even within Europe, Deloitte UK, Deloitte Italy, Deloitte Germany, they don't talk to each other as much either. So it's not like you're working with one company. And so when you think about your partner strategy, and especially in Europe and Asia, I find a lot of times that regional SIs, to Ross's point, are more nimble and agile and can do more stuff for you. And trying to do a Deloitte-wide European program is not easy, right? And it's because they're so franchised and they don't really care about each other, right? And work with each other. So that's another thing for the audience just to understand is that when you're thinking about your partner strategy globally, just think about that as well.
I think that also. I know. I see. We're all very much in agreement there. I would also say, in picking up on the point you made, Russ, about some of these big VARs who are performing some aspects of systems integration. It's still a relatively small piece of their business, but in that instance, for that customer, when they perform those services, they are acting as an integrator. But we, I know, have talked about the fact that, when you think about building your relationship with your global systems integrators, that's the number one mistake some of us have made in early stages, and we've seen other companies make, is treat them like a reseller of your product and treat them like they're going to expect to behave and be covered and do some standard things that you have from whether it's MDF or dual registration or, paid for personnel, those kinds of things that have been commonplace for many manufacturers in the VAR space are not commonplace in real true global systems integrators. And so you just really kind of need to be thinking through that approach and maybe, lessons learned from others, that treating them like a reseller is probably a pitfall.
I think that's really key. And I just want to crystallize this thought real quick, because there's a big difference in their business model of, are we generating services around the use and adoption of a technology, or are we using technology to solve a business problem? And it's a big, like, you're on one side of that river or you're on the other. There isn't a foot on both sides. And so you could put the E pluses and the WWTs and a lot of those guys in we really provide a very robust set of advanced services around product platforms, like doing your EMC's, storage refresh, or helping you move and manage a complex application in Azure. But we're not a 6,000 person app dev environment that's creating custom code to revolutionize the retail experience for Walmart. That's not their business. That is Accenture's business. That is Deloitte's.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Great question to ask is how many how many repos do you guys manage as a company? And like you asked that of Accenture, the answer becomes very quickly like, oh God, I wouldn't even know how to begin estimating that. It's in the tens of thousands. And you ask that of a Scott Miller WWT, and it's going to be, oh, we have one. We have a central Git repo. We put all our common code in to reuse. All right, well, there's a huge indicator right there. If it's not distributed development, it's all centralized. Okay, that's by definition going to be small.
Yeah.
Like it's, you guys are like, it's like you read my notes is like, this is a good transition point, because I often find when you get into conversations about GSIs, there's aspirations amongst channel people to say they look at them, they're very big companies, they got very big accounts. Therefore, if we just figure out how to attach to them, then we're going to make mint, right? And then they start talking about, we're going to build a program and we're going to have them do this and do this and do this, and then we're going to give them that. So the entire give the get thing. And I'm like going, okay, maybe we might want to throttle back expectations. So why don't we take a minute here and talk about this? Is like what, we just talked about, this is a very big common mistake, is trying to treat them like resellers. What are the other mistakes that are made when they're approaching the GSIs? What can we learn from what not to do?
I was never successful in selling the value to procurement.
Yeah.
So I in not at Equinix or in prior companies with interaction with global systems integrators. So trying to sell the value and the premium price to procurement, I didn't win there. And it wasn't until I had customers and use cases and went to the practices that I gained heavy. So I can't report any traction or magic in convincing procurement to pay more for something that they thought on paper they could get less elsewhere in this in the broader swath of integrators. But if I could tie it to a use case and tie it to an outcome and tie it to service revenue for them, then I could get some traction. That would be my takeaway.
Yeah, outcomes are so important. It has to resonate with them, or else they'll ignore you very easily, right? You'll have a nice meeting, a nice lunch, nice PowerPoint presentation, and then you won't see them again after that because they're so busy and you're so small, right? And so outcomes and stories, right? So my marketing too is all about stories to them, right? Of how this particular customer in this particular industry used our solution, and wow, right? And so you can do it too. It's like a rinse and repeat. Let's do it. The other thing I'll add here, also an example from several years back, is you guys all remember GDPR, right? And so when you want to go to market with a GSI, it's always, again, going back to that reference architecture and those solutions that they can build with you. And maybe they're powered by you, but they're really sold by a GSI. So one of the Accenture actually is we used them, and we went on like an 8-week sprint where, I don't know if you guys remember GDPR, but there's like 20 articles in it. And so our solutions were basically for 7 of those articles or something like that. And so Accenture worked with our engineering team, offshore, onshore, to build a solution for this particular thing. And they took it to market, and it was powered by our company, right? And so that really resonates with them. And it's amazing how many people from across Accenture leaned in on that, and how much brand visibility we got because of that, right? So that's super important.
It has something going off in the background. Jeannie, it may be you. Can you mute your line?
Well, Balaji, where'd you go? All right. Hey, he's back. All right. Like you're talking about getting into the individual practices. So in talking about that alignment, and Ross, you've talked about this as well, is that you have to enable them to do something. You have to be seen as something that they can leverage. Mm-hmm. So how do you approach these practices, particularly like, it's somewhat easy for an Oracle where you just came from to go walking into Accenture and saying, hey, let's do something. But if you're a mid-tier vendor, and by mid-tier to a GSI, that could still be $1 billion company. How do you approach them, and what do you need to do to get their attention?
It's really have to be very strategic about it. And I'll go back to my industry. I mentioned industry before. And so in my last company, we're, about a $400 million company. So not too big, not too small, but very small compared to our GSIs. And so I specifically said, these are the three industries that we really want to focus on. They're our top industries for us as a company. One of them we felt we could really go after was automotive. And so I said, who's the partner that I should go? And it was, in this case, it was Deloitte. And so, that's what I started working with, say, who are the industry people that I should work with? And I flew to Detroit and spent time there, right? The Deloitte's automotive industry lead sits there. She's ex-Ford, ex-GM, right? A bunch of people there, all ex-Ford, ex-GM, etc. And we started talking there and planning out about the enablement piece, go-to-market piece. By the way, oh gosh, we work with Bridgestone too. Oh wow, they're a customer of ours too. Let's work together on it, right? And so just started opening up other things to do. I also went across the pond, went to Europe, and I said I will invest in an automotive. I think they call it Automotive Excellence Center or something like that in Dusseldorf, right? And so you start to put those kinds of things in place to say, narrow it down a lot more, right? Rather than being, horizontal in nature, narrow it down to like 2 or 3 industries and then go after those people. And that's when the practice opens up even more. Because remember, the people that you're working with from a horizontal side by, they love Salesforce, they love Oracle, they love SAP, they love Workday, all these kind of places, right? So you want to get those people who can really move your brand and move your solutions. And I think it's industry and reference architecture from that.
I think it's those things for sure. And I think you got to do your homework a little bit on how they're organized and how they're positioning their practices. What one of them calls digital transformation, the other calls digital experiences, the other tells, a digital future. That it seems like that's all the same thing. And under the hood, even in their literature, while there are some commonalities, they will try to take a different angle. They will try to lead in. So doing your homework on and trying to imagine where your products and services would fit most logically. And then be willing to, in our case, knock on the doors of a couple of those practices to see which one you're going to get some traction with. Because if you have a horizontal product or application that might fit in several practices or might fit across several industries, you might have to knock on the doors of a few of the practices to pitch to get some traction. And in those cases, if you've got a customer that agrees with you, that is a customer in common, that can be a really powerful 3-way discussion. And we've had some success with a customer who preferenced us with a GSI they preferenced, where they really kind of sponsored us up to that discussion. And as a result, we now do much more with that GSI and other customers. And it really came on the backs of a strong partnership with the end customer and making that discussion 3-way in an effective fashion. So that's another way to crack in, is you've got a customer who's got a GSI who will also bring you to the table.
Yeah. I like the point you raised, Jules, because I'm wondering, because we often think about GSIs as not just the doers, they're designers, they're implementers, but they're also very much influencers. So what is the significance of how much influence do GSIs actually have on the purchase consideration? Or is this something that is customer driven, or is there oftentimes there's another partner that's in the deal that could be driving that? Where's the focal point of interest or influence?
Big time. They and one thing I'll just point out here is that as channel chiefs and as partner leaders, I think most of us, right, in our roles, we're asked to go and acquire new customers through partners, right? So new logos is very important. But one thing that is neglected, and again, I learned this the hard way, is GSIs, as you guys, I think, know, or if you don't know, is they really focus on increasing wallet share within customers, right? So diamond accounts, they'll stay in there forever, right? 100 years, right? 200 years, whatever. And so shifting your focus not only in getting new logos, but actually working with them on increasing wallet share within existing accounts that are common to you is really good, right? And so going back to what you said, influence, that's where influence plays even a bigger role. It's not only on the new logo side, but actually on increasing wallet share and going through that whole disruption, transformation things that GSIs go through. They can really play a big role there in influencing the technology stack and the solution.
I think it's so important. I'll just add on. I think it's so important you also have conversations with the industry leads. Talking to folks who are tech practices leads is great. But I think getting to the folks who are industry leads, you'll open your eyes to a whole different conversation. So like Andy Costello at Accenture, who runs the telco business there, he's got kind of the like really good lesson he taught me early in a conversation was, you're coming from the land of I don't care. Like the fact that Oracle's got all this interesting time, like we make telco stuff, like this is our business. And he's like, it doesn't matter. My job is not to sell technology to telco companies. My job is to transform the future of telecommunications and to help them monetize 5G and to achieve their strategic goals that they have. You've said nothing, and this is our first 5 minutes. He says, you said nothing that helps me achieve those goals. And it was so instructive of like, he didn't care that I had these capabilities. What he cared was, can I connect it directly to an outcome for one of my diamond customers that they're going to look and go, I'll write $100 million worth of services business right now if you can do that. That was eye-opening for me. It's like the tech guys, if I engaged with them, they really were curious about what are you doing and how's it work? And they couldn't get me to any customer, but the industry folks could get me there.
Yeah, industry's the way to go. I mean, I learned that the hard way, but that's the way to go. It takes longer. You got to be patient, but you got to be stubborn about it and get those guys, because they're the ones who own the P&L and make those kind of decisions. So
and ask them how they want to be too. Ask them. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
This partner type takes more patience, in my opinion, just like through industries. And in order to really build a preferred relationship with a global systems integrator, among all the different channel types I've worked in my career, this is one of those that I think it does take that, that patience you're talking about. And I do think if you think about, they are, as a category, true global systems integrators, the outlook for them looks pretty good through 2030, because we got more data, we got huge needs to bring data together around AI. There is, the AI is only going to be as effective for companies as the sort of the data they can bring together and then they can put into their large language models and that they can serve up. And so there will be there's a really sort of a promising outlook for this partner type, for the work they're going to be called upon to do for the customers that many of us in technology, that we are after serving as well. So I guess I just want to say, encourage people to recognize that and hang in there, because this channel partner type has tested patience, but that there's a tremendous amount of value in those relationships as they mature.
Yeah, I think, Jules, that's a great point to reiterate to the audience, is because I think we all face that in all of our companies and all of our roles, is that the CRO or the CEO or the president, whatever, they lose patience. They say, oh, what are these guys doing for us, right? And you got to keep reminding all your stakeholders it's a journey. You have to be patient with these guys. But once you start to set the seed and show success with them and they see it, you can get a lot of great business through them. But patience.
Larry, if I can add, I think it's important to, well, I'm going to shift on you, so you take us where you want to, but I want to talk about what's happening with AI and these guys and how it's changing their business. So
well, real quick, I want to make sure that, because we have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to a couple of questions that we do have. And Ronan White has been waiting patiently, and I think it's on point for what we were just talking about. Can we afford to just throw a channel person at the GSIs, or do you need someone that speaks their language in order to build those relationships? I think it goes without saying that this is not a sport for novices. This is that you have to actually go in there with some level of acumen and understanding to be able to make these relationships work.
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of minutes left. Ross, I agree with you. Oh, good. I thought you froze for a second. Well, look, if you stop talking, then I think you're frozen. That's as simple as that. But look, please, I've been hearing a lot about the triangulation of going to market in AI between GSIs, ISVs, and the vendors. Tell us a bit about where you see the GSIs going.
Before I left Oracle, I spent a lot of time with the GSIs talking about the adoption of AI, because obviously we had like 30 plus AI platforms sitting on OCI that we wanted them to use, and wanted to know, how are you transforming your business, was the question I asked all of them. And it ranged from, a fair amount of the smaller ones going, like, it's just terrifying because what's happening is changing everything from our body shop business. But all the big ones came to the same conclusion, which was, we're right now in the business of bodies times hours equals bills. What happens when AI starts replacing those bodies? So they're all starting to create AI knowledge workers that can do tasks that have value, that the time to accomplish the task is not the relevance anymore. It's the task itself. So human equivalent hours and things like that are starting to come around of, we can do this with AI, but it does it this way. What I think is absolutely fascinating, though, is all of them came to the conclusion, which was, AI will eat my customer's headcount before it eats mine, which I think is interesting. I think I lost you guys.
No, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, so that notion, the pictures for us, this notion of, I might have 768,000 people in Accenture, and you look at it and go, well, AI lets 2 people do the work of 10 twice as fast. Does that mean it's worth less than the 10 people were? No. Does that mean I need 10 less people optimizing AI? I need a different set of people, but do I need less of them? No. I need a different set of skill sets, but my customers want to automate way faster than I can automate the intelligence inside of my business. So most of them see AI not as a threat, but as an opportunity for them to accelerate transformation of their customers. So the outcome of this, I want to make everybody aware of, is they stopped caring about anything else. Like your firewall or your security product or your storage product or your latest, capability that solves this human capital management, it doesn't matter. What their customers are asking now is, how is this going to transform my business and make me more competitive? And all those industry things are driving 100% of their conversations right now.
Yeah.
It's consuming. So figure out how to draft in that transformation. There's money throwing around right now fast at it.
All right, we only have a couple minutes left. I just want to do a quick round the horn here and just say, one best piece of advice each from you on leveraging GSIs effectively.
Patience and industry focus.
Get out of procurement. Tie your use cases to projects that you can unlock that bring them services revenue, and leverage a customer as your testimonial in a 3-way conversation to land that point.
Build executive relationships at the highest level. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about your sales leader. I'm talking your CEO having a relationship with the practice leaders directly about customers.
That's a great point. Yeah, Ross, I think we neglected that, but just, there's 2 examples I can give you from my last 2 companies where we actually did that and had the CEO meet with Julie Sweet, for example, at Accenture and all that. That really helped. So great point, Ross.
There's a reason there's 550 Diamond accounts at Accenture, is that's how many people Julie Sweet can manage a relationship with.
Right.
And it really is that level of, she and her direct reports own those customers. So your CEO should have a relationship with them to make that work.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this has been a great conversation. We could keep going if we had the time. Unfortunately, we are running out of packets on the internet, so we are going to wrap it up at this point. I'm sure that we will have another follow-up on this at some point in the future. I want to thank the panelists, Jules, Johnston, Balaji, Subramanian, and Ross Brown. It really always a pleasure speaking to all of you. And for everybody who's hanging in out there on the virtual event, thanks for joining us this afternoon. It's been great having you.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.